Now, if you've played a lot of Star Wars video or computer games in your life, you've probably played one where you're a Jedi who can heal yourself or others. It's a pretty standard or common ability for Jedi in games, one in there mostly for the sake of good or interesting gameplay. Furthermore, if you've read or kept up with the lore or stories from the old expanded universe, you'll know there have been plenty of Jedi in the past who could use the Force to heal. Hell, there's even been Sith like Darth Bane, who could use the dark side to perform a type of temporary heal. But in the official Star Wars canon, we really hadn't seen much of it until very recently, having new examples of it in both The Mandalorian and in The Rise of Skywalker. And how much more of it we should see, or if we've already gotten so much that it breaks the lore, is a good question and one I'll examine in this video. Because if we just look at what I like to call the George Lucas canon, or the original 6 movies and the Clone Wars, we only have 2 real examples of healing, one very minor, that might not even be actual healing, and another one that had some incredible circumstances around it, but is nevertheless much more on par with what Ben Solo did at the end of Episode 9 to save Rey or bring her back from the dead. And the first one, and the only one really seen in the first 6 movies, is what Obi-Wan Kenobi does to Luke after he's attacked and knocked out by Tusken Raiders in A New Hope. Obi-Wan puts his hand on Luke's forehead for a few seconds, and moments later, Luke wakes up and seems relatively fine. And honestly here, I'd always just kind of thought this was Obi-Wan's way of checking on Luke to see if he was okay, and or maybe waking him up somehow, perhaps even using the Force to do it. Never really thought of this as actual healing. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if, when filming the movie all those years ago now, George Lucas simply told Sir Alec Guinness to have his character check on Luke, to do something to see if he was okay, and that's simply what he came up with, putting his hand on his forehead like that. Meaning, I'm not sure, though I could certainly be wrong, that this was ever meant to imply actual healing was happening here. And even if it was, it certainly doesn't appear that Kenobi is mending broken bones or healing any sort of major internal or external injuries. At most, he's maybe curing Luke's headache or just bringing him back to consciousness. In the Clone Wars animated series, then, we get a pretty extreme example of healing, though again, the circumstances around it are also pretty extreme or unique. It happens in Season 3 in the Mortis story arc when Anakin transfers the last essence of the daughter into Ahsoka and brings his Padawan back from the dead. Which, yes, is very similar to how Ben Solo transfers his life essence into Rey and brings her back from the dead at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. And in both cases, the one facilitating the transfer of essence to bring someone back is a Skywalker, making it an ability unique to the Chosen One and his descendants, perhaps. Though the movie heavily implies it's because of the Force dyad with Rey that he is able to do this. Which I do hope is the case. I do hope that it's because of the Force dyad that he was able to literally bring her back from the dead, not that he could have theoretically brought anyone back. Somehow their 2 spirits are linked so they can transfer essence back and forth, or something. I mean, they can already teleport objects across space and time, so why not do this too, I guess. Anyway, in the Mortis story arc, I think it's safe to say the 3 reasons why the essence transfer to bring Ahsoka back from the dead worked is because, first of all, the daughter whose essence was put into Ahsoka was a type of god, you could say. For 2, it happened on Mortis, a place that seems to exist somewhere between the living force and the cosmic force, making it maybe easier to do something of this nature. And 3, it was the Chosen One who did it, and the Mortis gods do very much recognize Anakin as the Chosen One. The father even wants him to take his place to keep balance between his 2 children. And so, no matter what you might think about the end of The Rise of Skywalker, at least there is some precedence for Ben Solo being able to give his life to save Rey. We saw almost the exact same thing in the Clone Wars, just, again, with more incredible circumstances around it. And when it comes to just Force healing in general, in theory, I don't have a problem with it and can buy that someone strong enough with the light side, the right individual you could say, could heal another being or creature to some extent. Especially if, in order to pull it off or make it work, you have to give up some of your own life force, which is basically what Rey said in The Rise of Skywalker after healing the serpent creature. And we also saw in The Mandalorian, Baby Yoda fell unconscious for some time after healing Greef Karga, or curing his poison, implying it took something out of him too. Though in both cases, I almost got the sense that they recharged afterwards, which I'm not sure is an idea I like. Instead, I think if you want to save another or heal them, you do have to give part of your own life, in a sense, which, for one, would limit the amount of healing we see in Star Wars, and for two, would turn it, seemingly, into the ultimate selfless act, literally giving part of your life for another person. But of course, the biggest problem with all of this, and I think a pretty big clue that George Lucas himself wasn't a big fan of healing in Star Wars, is that basically the whole premise of the prequels is that Anakin wants to learn a way to stop people he cares about from dying. He even falls to the dark side because he's so concerned about learning a secret way to save Padme in childbirth, one promised to him by Palpatine, that he turned on the Jedi in order to secure his chance to learn this. And I don't know, if Force healing was a thing that even a few Jedi of the time, even a few Jedi throughout history, were capable of, you think Anakin would have probably heard of that and looked into it. Even if he hadn't heard of any cases, he may have still hit the archives to look for examples in the past. Instead, when Palpatine tells him there was this Sith that could save people from dying, he asks if it's possible to learn this power, implying he's never heard of anything quite like this before. And of course, the answer from Palpatine is not from a Jedi, again implying healing was not something Jedi, in Lucas's mind, could do. And you might want to try and argue semantics here, and or claim there's a difference between healing and saving people from dying, or say that Palpatine was simply lying and Anakin was too stupid to look into the Jedi Force healing thing even after he'd learned Sith could do it. Either way though, I think it's heavily implied that Force healing is not something the Jedi of this time period are doing, otherwise the prequels are suddenly poked so full of holes it's ridiculous, especially again considering what Anakin really wants in these movies is control, and mainly control over life and death. He wants to be able to heal and save people, and if this is to some extent something Jedi are already doing or capable of in this time period, why does he not pursue it that way? And yes, I do realize here that the Clone Wars series, the Mortis story arc, pokes a few holes in the prequels as well when it comes to all of this, because Anakin knows he can save lives or bring people back from the dead. He did it with Ahsoka, and I know some seem to think Anakin and the others don't remember that they had their minds wiped of the whole experience, but as far as we know, the only one who forgot anything was Anakin, and it was those dark visions of the future that he saw that were erased. Otherwise, all three of them, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka, should remember that experience. Though, as I've been saying here myself, Anakin likely realized that was a very special, highly unusual circumstance, saving Ahsoka on Mortis, I mean. Though in all reality, that experience should have been on his mind when he started to dream about Padme dying in childbirth. And maybe it was. Maybe when he heard the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, he gave it more credibility than he otherwise would have, because of the experience on Mortis. I know, a bit of mental gymnastics, but it's hard to explain why what happened on Mortis didn't impact how he acts in Revenge of the Sith, other than the obvious answer, that story was created after the fact. Anyway, getting back to the Rise of Skywalker, oddly enough, I almost have more issue with Rey healing the serpent than when she heals Kylo's stab wound or when he later brings her back from the dead, because if not for healing the snake, we could contain all the healing in that film within the context of the Force dyad and say that explains all of it, though it's still a pretty weak explanation. That those two can only heal each other because they share some kind of crazy, unique bond. The healing in the movie then, or bringing back people from the dead, would have rare, incredible circumstances around it that are similar, you could say, to what happened on Mortis. But because Abrams and company wanted to first establish that healing is possible, they gave us that useless scene where Rey heals the serpent, and that's all that scene really does, establishes that healing is a thing in Star Wars to set up or make plausible what will happen later on in the film. Oh, and when the serpent slithers away, it accidentally and conveniently breaks a hole in the wall that they can escape through, which is really done to try and hide or mask the fact that, again, this is just an establishing scene. It tries to make it seem like Rey did something good, so she got rewarded by fate or by the Force for it, when again, it's all about trying to subtly say her being able to heal is no big deal. But of course it is a big deal, because if not, if it's just something a semi-trained Jedi can do, which Rey is, then why haven't other Jedi done it in the past? Why doesn't Obi-Wan at the very least try to heal Qui-Gon in The Phantom Menace? And of course you'll say, he wasn't strong enough with the Force, which is a fair answer. But if it is something that Rey is just sort of picking up because maybe she's that strong with the Force, why didn't someone like Anakin, who is, I'd hope, at least equally strong with the Force, ever able to just pick it up? Or is this supposed to be a unique ability to Rey? But that then takes us back to Baby Yoda being able to heal and trying to figure out why he, seemingly without training, was able to do it. And I think many want to just kind of give him a pass because he's a Yoda, or a member of that species, which we of course assume is just very strong with the Force naturally. So this might just be a thing they can do, or most of them can do, because Yoda doesn't seem, as far as we know, capable of healing. Though, fun, crazy, stupid theory time, maybe healing and giving a permanent part of their life force could be how Yoda's species ages. Maybe they are, well, not immortal, but close to it, and they grow older only after they give their life force to others. This would explain why, again, seemingly untrained, Baby Yoda was able to heal, but fully trained Grand Master Yoda never does, because he was so old he had nothing left to really give anymore. And yeah, I know that one's way out there, but trying to make sense of some of the things Disney Star Wars has added to the canon requires some pretty interesting mental gymnastics. And though I do think that, in theory, a Jedi being able to heal does make sense, especially in something like a video game, I don't think it's something Lucas ever intended a Jedi being able to do normally. Yes, he let it essentially fly in the Mortis story arc, and I've heard before that story was his idea, but I think he only let it fly there because of the crazy circumstances around it. And so if you're going to do healing in Star Wars, I feel it needs to be a rare special ability, and that it should come with a major drawback or price, like literally shortening your own life to do it, because otherwise it just adds too many problems to the storytelling. There's less tension in so many things if we know a Jedi can just heal themselves or others, and again, it makes us look back at the prequels and wonder why Anakin, the chosen one, not only didn't know about healing, but wasn't trying to learn and master the ability. I mean, how silly or just plain stupid is the ending of the whole Skywalker saga when you really think about it? Because Anakin spent a whole trilogy wanting to stop people he cared about from dying. It's what led him to fall to the dark side. It's the crux of the whole damn story. But at the very end of that same story, two characters just kind of have the ability to save the ones they care about from dying, an ability that some would consider to be unnatural, and that couldn't be learned from a Jedi. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me how you feel about Force healing. I know it's great in video games and all, but does it work in the films? Is healing something all or most Jedi should be able to learn? Is it something only a rare few should be able to master? Or should it be reserved only for the most special or rare of occasions? Whatever you think, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.